ever plugged in an external hard drive only to have it go completely unrecognized? Or worse, faced a boot failure that leaves your computer useless? These frustrating issues can stop you in your tracks, but don't worry. In this video, we'll reveal the step-by-step fixes IT professionals use to solve hard drive boot failures, unrecognized drives, and more. Whether it's a BIOS misconfiguration, a corrupted system, or a faulty USB port, we've got the solutions to get you back up and running. Ready to troubleshoot like a pro? Let's dive in. In this second part, we will see other problems that can occur on hard drives. And we will also try to determine the cause to provide a solution: failure to boot. And we start with a boot problem on the hard drive. This type of error signals that Windows was unable to load properly. The error message that appears asks us to insert a system disk in order to boot. In fact, it's the BIOS itself that can't find a bootable drive to boot the computer. The problem: to fully understand how the computer performs its startup process, we will see these different steps. First, the computer turns on. Then he launches what is called the self-test. Post power on self-test. This is what triggers the booting after having checked that everything is okay. If the post has passed all of these tests, then the operating system will be loaded. And finally, control of the computer will be transferred to the operating system. A disk boot failure occurs mainly because no boot device is found. So why is the BIOS unable to locate the boot disk? It could be a misconfiguration of the boot order in the BIOS. Because if a disk, which does not contain an operating system, is placed at the top of the list in the BIOS boot sequence, then the computer will not be able to boot. It is also possible that it is the operating system itself that is damaged. If the system in the hard drive is corrupted, then the BIOS will not be able to recognize it. The hard drive could also be faulty, or an update that went wrong could very well corrupt some data. The solutions. We will now see the different possible solutions to try to determine the cause and find a solution. Change the BIOS boot order, and we start by focusing on the order of starting the BIOS. If you have a USB drive plugging into the computer, and that device has a higher priority than the hard drive that contains the operating system, then the computer will attempt to boot to that drive and not to the hard drive, which contains the operating system. You could therefore start by unplugging the key and starting the boot again. Otherwise, well, you would have to enter the BIOS to place the disk, which contains the system, at the top of the list. To check the boot order of a computer, simply follow these steps. First, restart the computer. Then, depending on the model of the motherboard, you will have to press F2, F8, F10, F12, or the delete key several times to enter the BIOS. When you have arrived in the BIOS, you will have to access the Startup tab. This is where you can place the hard drive that contains the system at the top of the list. And finally, don't forget to save your changes before restarting the PC. Repair the system. If after that your system still won't boot, then we could try to fix it. To do a system repair, you will need an installation media that already contains the Windows system. Ideally, you should download the small Windows utility, which is called Media Creation Tool, to dedicate a USB key to starting Windows. Once you have created your Windows installation media, you will need to boot the computer on this new boot media. You will then be able to repair the startup by clicking on Repair Your Computer and by selecting Troubleshoot. Cisco. Repair the disk with the CHKDSK command. Now that we've tested the starting order and try a system repair, you can try to repair the disk itself just in case it is damaged. To do this, simply run the check disk command CHKDSK in a command prompt that will be simulated by the boot disk you created just before. Because remember, it is impossible for you to start Windows. So, you won't be able to run a check disk with the Windows command prompt, delete last added device. And the last point we're going to look at to try to solve a startup problem is to remove the last device you would have installed. To do this, remove it and try to start the PC again. And if, despite everything we've just seen, the boot problem is still not solved, then we should see to completely reinstall the operating system. Unrecognized hard drive. We will now see an external hard drive problem that cannot be recognized by the system. External drives allow us to back up our most important data. Even though cloud storage is very common, having this data at your fingertips has several advantages. An external hard drive works very simply. All you have to do is plug it in, and logically, it is automatically recognized by the system and ready to use. But sometimes your reader is not recognized. So, let's look at some troubleshooting steps that you could follow to fix this problem. Make sure it's plugged in and turned on. Even if it may seem silly, you should always go for the simplest and most logical when you start your troubleshooting. And so, you have to start by seeing if the disk is well connected and that it receives power. Some drives are powered directly from the USB port, and others need an external power supply to operate. If the external drive came with AC power, then plug it in. And if it comes with 2 USB sockets, then you need to connect the 2 plugs to the PC. Try a different USB port. If the drive still doesn't work, after checking its connection, then you could try to change the USB port, or even try it on another PC. It can happen that some USB ports are more capricious than others. If it's a 3.0 port, try to plug it into a 2.0 port. A 3.0 port is blue, and black are the USB version 2.0 ports. If the disk is plugged into a USB hub, which allows you to connect several USBs in one, well, try to plug it in directly to see what happens. And you can also try the external drive on a completely different operating system. For example, if on Windows the disk is not recognized, then try it on a Mac. It's possible that the drive is simply not formatted for the computer you're trying to use. Update your drivers. Another source of problem is on updating your drivers. It is possible that Windows is experiencing update problems on the external drive, which you are trying to recognize. To check this, you need to open the Start menu, then run a search for the device manager, and open it. If you can recognize your hard drive and there's a little exclamation mark on it, then it means it's time to update it. To do this, you have to right-click on the device and choose Property, and all you have to do is click on Update Driver, enable and format the drive. And if after all this, your external disk drive is still not recognized by Windows, then it would be time to dig a little deeper. In the Start menu, we will go to the Disk Manager. If your disk appears but is not recognized, then it will need to be activated and formatted. To do this, simply create a new volume and follow the different steps. If a disk requests to be formatted, its storage space will not be allocated, as can be seen here. So be careful, because if you create a new volume, well, all the data will be erased, because the tool will proceed to a complete formatting of the disk to put it in the right format. And finally, if the storage space is well allocated, but it does not display a letter next to its name, then you will simply have to add one. Each disk must have an assigned letter. It is an identifier which allows Windows to recognize it. So, no letter, no disk. Disk cleanup, Diskpart. In some cases, even if it is still very rare, it is possible that the formatting of your disk does not work, even though it is present in the Disk Manager. To recover your drive's full capacity, you'll need to run the Windows Clean command. which will return your drive to an unformatted state. So, be careful, because once again, this command will erase the entire disk. So, make sure you don't have any other options, and also be careful not to get the wrong disk. To initiate this command, you must open the Start menu and launch the Diskpart tool. The list disk command allows you to list all your disks in the system. Then, you have to enter the configuration of the disk that is causing the problem. For the example, I'm going to take my disk 2. The Select Disk 2 command allows you to enter the configuration of disk 2. And finally, the Clean command will format the disk completely, testing the drive without its case. And finally, if none of the options we've seen work, it would be interesting to extract the disk from its external case and test it live, without its case. If you have a desktop PC, you can open it and connect your drive directly inside. If not, well, you'll need to get a docking station or an external SATA to USB adapter. If this last test works, then it's because your case is faulty. And if it still doesn't work, then it may be the hard drive that gave up the ghost.